Hello and welcome to After the Sermon, a Bethany podcast where we have the privilege of digging deeper into our Sunday messages. I am Tami and today I'm joined with Pastor David Baxley and Pastor Steve Musto. We are marching through Ephesians.
Yes.
It is hard to not see this just as a list of things to do, a Nike commercial, just do it.
Yeah.
You are doing Ephesians 5, starting at verse 3. So we are and going through 17.
But correct? we're getting to the controversial stuff. This is what you tune in for.
Yeah, that's true.
So
this is where the rubber meets the road and it gets fun.
Right. Yeah. We're going to talk about men and women and children and slavery next week.
Yep.
And this week we're talking about greed and sexual immorality and the definitions of those, and so we're getting a little spicy.
Yeah. We are getting a little spicy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start reading.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. But sexual immorality and any impurity or greed should not even be heard of among you, as it is proper for saints. Obscene and foolish talking or crude joking are not suitable, but rather giving thanks. For know and recognize this: every sexual, immoral, or impure or greedy person who is an idolater does not have an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty arguments, for God's wrath is coming on the disobedient because of these things. Therefore, do not become their partners. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of light consists of all goodness, righteousness, and truth, testing what is pleasing to the Lord. Don't participate in the foolish works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what is done by them in secret. Everything exposed by the light is made visible. For what makes everything visible is light. Therefore, it is said, "Get up, sleeper, and rise up from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." Pay careful attention then to how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of the time, because the days are evil. Don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah. So this is part 3 of the walking. So we had walking in unity as a church. And Chase last week is talking about walking by putting on the new self. You take off and you put on. And then this week is walking as a God imitator, as someone who wants to do what God would have them do, wants to believe what God would have them believe. And I'll add this just before we jump in for anybody who sees this before the message. This is going to be kind of a PG-13 message because we're going to talk about sexual immorality. So just in general, like our services are never for children. It's okay if some of them are in there. I just always feel bad when there are kids in our service. Like, why would you want to listen to me if you're 7 years old? My goodness, go with your peers and learn about Jesus in an environment that's suitable for you. But I realize that there are going to be kids in there. And so parents, grandparents just have to make a decision because we're not going to pull any punches.
No, because this message needs to be heard.
Yeah. And we're going to, so sexual immorality. We'll talk about same-sex issues. We'll talk about what constitutes immorality and what is not. So there you go.
Okay. I know something that we have talked about, the three of us, and even in our service development team, is where do we get our definition of sexual immorality?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the crux of this is being a God imitator is if we are going to, if we're going to live in a definition, if we're going to live our lives, we needed to be able to define those things based on a standard. And most of us, we define how we live based on a lot of different things. But we should always be looking to God for his definition of things, how we live, and especially the really important things. So, for instance, if I say, what is cheating? We would go, a lot of us would go to is it really cheating? Like if I'm taking advantage of someone who has way more than I do, if I'm taking advantage of a large company, is that actually cheating? Well, I don't, and we have these like little things that we do that we make allowances for based on what? Based on our own experience, based on what we've heard from other people, based on media we've consumed, based on, well, who cares about any of those things? It's what God decides. God says, I hate when your weights and measures are off. I hate when you try to cheat each other. I hate that. Be honest. That's what honesty is. That's the only definition. It doesn't matter whether somebody has a lot or a little, or it's a company, or whether the company is, doing evil things or not. It doesn't matter. God says, this is how I want you to live. So this is the definition that we live by. But where we get our definitions of things like morality is often just, we kind of pick them up as we go. Or worse, we get them from a place like Hollywood that teaches us this is what being moral means.
And I think what happens, a lot of these are subtly spoken to us. We don't even realize the messages and the narratives that are there. I was in my late 20s when I realized I had a view of what a healthy relationship looks like. And it went all the way back to this first movie I watched as like a 16 or 17-year-old is called Jerry Maguire. And if anybody's seen that movie, most people haven't seen it anymore because it's so old. But I remember I had this misconception of what a healthy thing looked like. And even in my own marriage of how to talk to each other, engaging each other, going all the way back to how romance was presented in this movie. It had redefined health to me, and I never knew it.
And it's so subtle. I know.
That's exactly right. We don't even, and I think that's important to say, because I think most of us say, well, no, I've defined this, or I've read the Bible. I don't think we realize how much these other, all the medias that we take in define things for us before I ever read that verse in the Bible, and how much I am reading that verse through that filter instead of interpreting what I just watched in that movie through a filter of the Bible. And the order of that determines whether we're being an imitator of God or an imitator of the world around us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And so he is going after, Paul leaves no doubt in the list that you read, Tami, he's not just talking about one kind of sexual immorality. So there are 4 different words that he uses, Greek words, that basically covers every kind of thing you can possibly imagine. Obscene, sexual immorality, impurity, obscene and foolish talking, crudeness, all of these things in English have their counterpart words in Greek. And this covers pretty much everything. So this is not just telling dirty jokes. This is not
having
just
sex outside of marriage.
Sex outside of marriage. It's more than that. It covers the whole gamut of things. And the question is, well, what is that? But this is, Paul's leaving no room for anybody to say, yeah, but God wasn't talking about that. I mean, he didn't really give us a definition for that. No, he did.
Okay.
And these are, we're going to talk about God's definition of these words.
Is there a progression in these words, or not really?
Not necessarily. You mean in terms of like moving to severity?
If you have crude joking, it's going to lead to sexual immorality.
Well, that's the idea behind it. Is this is the reason why crude and coarse joking is not allowed, and Paul doesn't really unpack this, but the idea behind it is when you accept that into your life, it becomes normative. It's sort of like a wild raccoon comes to your back porch and you feed it. And then it comes back the next night and you feed it. And little by little, this wild raccoon comes back, and then they bring family members, other raccoons, and now you're feeding like all these raccoons. And finally someone comes over to your house after like months and they're like, whoa, wait, what is going on? And you go, oh, I didn't realize that this I didn't think about it that this was odd or that this was different than what other people do.
He feeds raccoons.
I was just feeding raccoons. I had no idea. Never fed a raccoon. Not on purpose. Like I had no idea that this was strange. Why? Because we've embraced this and accepted it into our world, and it has become normative to us. And the same thing happens with anything. The things that we say, how many times have we looked at something in the rearview mirror and go, wait a minute, how did I allow this? How did this become okay in my world?
So it's so easy to read these things and think, okay, I'm going to put my TV in a closet.
Yeah.
I'm never going to go to Marcus Theater again, which is a problem. But I totally understand why legalism happens, because it feels easier to put a hedge around it than to.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so we'll talk about that a little bit in the message. When we put a hedge around it, that's the easy thing to do. And it can be an answer in some situations, right? So I
would agree.
You have somebody who is an alcoholic, for instance. The answer is not, well, I carry around a flask of whiskey with me wherever I go as a reminder to, no. You do not do that.
Yeah.
Do not do that. You stay as far away from it as possible. You don't allow it in your home.
Yeah.
You don't go into bars. You don't go into places that trigger you. So there's wisdom in that. That's not the answer to everything. And unfortunately, for a long time, we made it an answer to every possible scenario. I just cut that scenario out of my life, and I'll talk about some of those from my own life in the message.
There's an underlining theme here. He doesn't say it directly, but it really is the heart. I'm taken back to 1 Peter when he said, as obedient children, be holy in all you do. Like it's that same idea that Paul's saying, as dearly loved children, imitate God. What is that? What is the driving motivation for how we make that decision? What is the driving reason I'm going to cut something off or put up a boundary or whatever extreme we want to say or not? Is it driven by, because I want to be representative of the God that loves me.
Yeah.
And he has loved me. I want to love him. I want to be holy as he is holy. I just wonder if that's not, we don't often come to the conversation of how do I love God well with my life? The question we're often asking is, what can I do or not do? What can I get away with? And I'm, even as a 41-year-old, when we ask that question, I'm reminded of like 14-year-old David. And I remember the first time, and my 15-year-old David, I guess this time, had my first girlfriend, and my dad and I were in the car together, and he's like, all right, you got your first girlfriend. And I kissed her, and he's like, all right, you had your first kiss. Son, what are your standards? What are your boundaries to keep this relationship God honoring? And all I could say was, well, I just know that thing over there is wrong. Right. I just knew that I wasn't supposed to have sex with her. And in my 14-year-old brain, I was trying to calculate
how close to Z,
how close I could get to there without that being the sin, because it was a rule that I had defined my relationship with God by, instead of purity or holiness, what Paul says here. So every time I read it, it pierces me. Should not even be heard among you. Yeah. So now I just bring that to David's life. What would it look like? Would someone say sexual morality? What would it look like to say it could even be heard among you? Like, couldn't even be considered that would be somehow a part of your mind, part of your life, and the evidence that we see. That's a different conversation than what are the things I got to get rid of so I don't sin, so I don't break that rule. Yeah. And that's what's keeping us maybe from a healthier version of this conversation.
Right.
I wonder if sometimes here's the line, I don't want to cross the line, even becomes about myself because I did it, as opposed to like you were saying, what honors my God, what serves my God.
And you know what? Unless you are the most extremely self-disciplined person, that won't work. It won't work. I meet with people all the time, and what do we find? That rule over here, when I was just trying to make sure I don't obey that rule doesn't really create a standard. Because I'm more like making a rule that I know I'm supposed to have. It's not an ownership of my heart for how I want to live and who I want to be. And so when I get close to that rule, then opposing narratives that we talked about come into our minds. And so as long as rules if rules are the reason, I think we're going to struggle.
We're gonna fail.
Or even fail. Yeah. And when we just put up all these things to not fail, I even at the end of the day, if it's just so I don't do that one thing, I think we're missing what Paul's trying to tell us.
So what I think I hear you saying is, if rules are a reason, it's not good. We're going to fail. We're going to blow it. If our reason is to love our Father so much that we want to imitate him, we have a fighting chance of not making these choices.
Verse 17 is Paul's advice. Don't be foolish. Understand what God's will is.
That's great.
What does God want you to do?
What does God want us? Yeah.
Don't be foolish.
Yeah.
Because what's the opposite of doing God's will, of what the Lord's will is? Foolishness.
Yeah.
That's foolishness. So
good, Steve.
Don't be foolish.
That sounds easy.
It is
Okay.
easy in the sense that God's not trying to trick us, and he lays things out clearly for us. We're the ones who do gymnastics to try to get around what God has laid out for us to do.
That's what 14-year-old David was doing. I was doing gymnastics in my mind.
Yeah.
So why do we do that? Why do we get as close to the fire as humanly possible, and then we're so surprised when we're burnt?
Because we want to.
Okay.
That's right.
I mean, why? This is the beginning of all sin. Eve wants not just the knowledge of good and evil. She sees that the fruit is pleasing to the eye. It looks like it tastes good. And so she eats it and gives some to Adam. And Adam's like, you know what? You're right. This does look good. I should eat this. So it's both got this benefit, supposedly, and it looks really enticing. Nothing has changed. Everything that is laid out for us that pulls us away from the will of God is the same thing. It looks really good, and supposedly it's going to meet a need in us. If I just do this, if I just stop doing this, if I just buy into this, if I just whatever it is, then this need in me is going to be met. So we spent a lot of time on the sexual immorality piece, but greedy is one of the other things.
Agreed.
There's a reason why, like most of us, when we see someone, a professional athlete, a CEO of a major company, whatever it is, and we hear that they made $100-something million this year, the rest of us go, I'd quit. Like, why would you keep going out onto the football field and get CTE and all this stuff? I would quit if I were you. Are you kidding? $100 million? But there's something something happens when you start to accumulate that does not allow you to turn off this. All you want, greed is self-propagating. All it wants is more.
It's an addiction that can't be satisfied.
It cannot. And no matter what you do, greed will always say a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more. And it'll always push that narrative in your mind. So you say, if we were to define it, we would say, well, how much money would be enough for us? Like $10 million, and I'd call it quits. Somebody makes $10 million, and they're like, you know what's better than $10 million? $20 million. Okay. Because they can't stop. That definition of enough has been thrown to the wind.
I think the other problem with greed is that we often we associate greed with those that are making $100 million. We associate greed with those that seem to make the most money and can use it however they want. And Paul's not writing to just the rich. He is writing to the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich, and everyone in between.
He's writing to slaves, as we'll find out next week.
That's right. Writing to slaves as well,
and challenging them with not being greedy.
And if you want to talk about cultural influence lying to us about greed, I think one of the ways cultural influence lies to us about greed is that if you don't have as much as that person, then anything you want is not greed. They're the greedy ones.
Right.
If I have if I make $1,000 a month and they make $100,000 a month, then they should be the one that have to make sacrifices. I should be able to accumulate more and more until I at least am matched with them. Yeah. They're the greedy ones that keeping me from this money. And we never self-evaluate to say, but God's given me this. What am I to do with it for him? We've allowed the world to say, no, until you have the comforts you want and the freedoms you want with your money like they do, you don't have to consider that your own morality of money could be flawed.
See, I think we've added a narrative to that. I think you're absolutely right.
Okay.
I think we've added a narrative, which is not only until I make as much as they do, I don't have to do anything. It is, we should take away from them.
Yes, I think we've added that narrative.
We should take some things away from them so that everybody then, and give some of their money to people like me.
Yeah. Why do they get that much? Don't I deserve?
So that I should catch up with where they are.
Yeah.
And in an economic system, this is socialism and whatever. And that's just economics. That none of that matters. Yeah. What matters is the heart behind it that says, no, God is not the one who chooses to give to different people. These people have a lot because they're bad people. And they shouldn't have that. And so let's punish them by not even giving any thought to the idea that God might be involved
in what they have.
And we've defined, and never giving thought to the fact that I want what they want is my own form of greed.
Yeah.
That demanding that I should have and take for myself because I want certain things and to be comfortable. Even that narrative, we'll throw the narrative, it's not fair. You attacked that really well a couple weeks ago, challenged that idea. This is the same thing, but we've justified, I'm going to say middle-class greed. We've justified middle-class greed because of a secular narrative, not a biblical one.
So you're saying this is like the verse that talks about get the log out of your own eye before you take the speck out of your brother's kind of thing? When it comes to
more, it's more it's tied to coveting.
It is.
There's a reason why God warns the Israelite people about coveting. I mean, think about all the things, God's top 10 list. He's got 10 things that he form the core of the Mosaic law. And one of those things is I don't look over at my next door neighbor's
donkey
tent and go like, hey, oh man, his tent is so much nicer than my tent. I wish I had that too, because of where it leads. And
he's got a 3-camel garage.
I need
3-camel garage.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Steve is totally
all about the tent.
So then there was a phrase, I need to find the verse, but what I hear you saying then is Thanksgiving is super important then.
Yeah. So, and he says,
Verse
4, obscene, foolish talking, or crude joking are not suitable. But what's the answer? Giving thanks.
Give thanks.
Giving thanks. So here I've been thinking about this because this is hard. Why is giving thanks the antidote to like dirty jokes or your mind being in the gutter all the time? I remember sitting in church, in youth group, whatever it was, and occasionally the pastor, the speaker would say something, and as teenage boys, they would use a word and we would laugh, at that word because it had some sort of connotation to it. And I still am very aware of this when I teach.
Yeah.
That we got teenage girls and boys in the room, and I you know what? It's not just the teenagers. We got adults out there too who've allowed their minds to go down a road where this is the first connotation they think of when they hear someone use a word or a phrase or whatever.
And they giggle.
They go right there in their minds. They go right there. And the antidote, actually, let me say this. We've lifted this up as a valuable thing. What's the number one funniest joke to come out of The Office? The TV show The Office. What's come out of it? That's what she said. It's a sex joke. It's on T-shirts. It's what's on everybody's. And we say it. Christians say it, and it's got a sexual connotation to it. That's the whole point. is that it's got a sexual connotation to it. And we just go, isn't that funny? The antidote to this, Paul says, is not purifying your mind. He says it's giving thanks. Why? One of the major reasons, because sex is built and designed by God. Like God stood at his workbench and built this thing called sex, this beautiful thing. And we should be way more thankful for it than we are. To thank God that exists, to thank God that he put boundaries around it, because outside of God's boundaries, it is the most damaging thing we have on this earth. We should be thanking God for that. We should be grateful to God for that. When we hear, instead of hearing something and going, you know what that means, there should be something in us that goes, oh God, thank you for that gift. What a wonderful gift that is. This serves as an antidote. The idea that I can have a depth of intimacy and relationship with Kathy that I don't have with anybody else, I'm so grateful to God for that. And that should really be the fruit that comes out of these kinds of things, and not just letting our minds go to a dark place.
So if we add to that, and building from what you just said, because I agree with everything you just said, it's interesting that Paul connects sexual morality and greed.
Yep.
Because both of them are like core things in our lives. A lot of us desire different things, but almost just about all of us are wrestling with sexual desire and financial desire.
Intimacy.
Yeah. We like God has wired us for the, like you just described, this beautiful thing. And so we are contending against probably two of the most powerful driving desires in our mind and our body, that we are constantly being told we have an internal desire wired in us for them, and a secular narrative keeps saying, validate that desire, experience it. Whatever will meet your desire, whether it's money, whether it's multiple partners, whether it's defining your own sexual identity, defining your own sexual morality, whatever this is, you can define all of these instead of coming back. And where thanks is the antidote to that is I thank God for what he's designed and given me, for the wife he's given me, for the spouse he's given me. I thank God for the gifts or the jobs he's given, for the home I have. I try to, when I walk out of my home in the morning, I'm going to have time with God. One of the things I try to remind myself of is just to thank God for what I see in that room around me, because I want to just stay grateful for those things. Yeah. That is a thing that helps me from covetousness and greed. But I think giving thanks it's the reminder of everything you just said, but it's also the antidote against the desires consuming us for what we think will satisfy and what we don't have. When I give thanks, I realize the Spirit is working in that to create a God-given satisfaction with what he has and where he has me that doesn't come outside of giving thanks. It's why we have a whole holiday dedicated to this. We preach this around Thanksgiving, but then we go on and go shopping the next day for everything we don't have. But like, this is the core tension we're wrestling with.
So we only have probably 6 minutes left, but I'm sitting here thinking of our single friends that God has called into singleness, those that struggle with same-sex attraction and have decided to honor their God. They are not going to pursue an intimate relationship. And we're saying, God's created you this way. This is what you're supposed to want. It's huge desire. They're feeling stuck right now. How do we speak to them?
Yeah, I think there's twofold in that. I think we recognize, though God has created this thing, that we also recognize that all of our interactions with God-given desires are in a world that is contending against God's design because of sin. And, when I've talked to some of my friends in the same place, one of the things that we're wrestling down is the effect and the corruption of sin that may keep us from our desires. And we all encounter this in various ways. It's I think one of the deceptions we often are told by the world around us, and we're continuing this, that all married people will tell you this. You get engaged, you can't wait to get married, because then all your desires are going to be fulfilled. Right. And then you get married and you're like, crap, this is not fulfilling all my desires. Why? Because sin. Wherever your station is in life, where God has you, single or even widowed. I mean, there's people that are widowed
Yes.
that are, and people that for various situations, even if they're married, can't have sex. Like, I mean, like not all married people are out there having sex whenever they want. I mean, there are so many things going on in this world. And when we focus on how do I get that desire met versus recognizing, man, I am contending in this world around me, but God has created me and called me with a divine purpose that I can still find satisfaction in. And and giving thanks to God, thank you for this calling. For there is power and beauty in multiple stages of life, even outside of same-sex attraction. People that are struggling with that, even there's single people that are going to be single, that desire what even could be right there in front of them. But God said, "This is the life I've called for you." And how do we even contend in any of these situations? It's a giving thanks and recognizing God has placed me here. I want here. I desire here. The desires aren't always inherently wrong. Just like a desire for a bigger house isn't inherently wrong, but this is where God has put me. How do I see what God wants in this moment? I think beginning to give thanks, Paul is talking about that. But there's also then saying, so in light of that, Lord, and come back to verse 17, what is your will for my life now in where you have put me?
So Paul links sexual immorality and greed with idolatry in verse 5.
Oh, there you go.
And idolatry is what? It's taking a good thing and making it the ultimate thing.
Oh, that's good.
It's pushing God off the pedestal of our lives and putting something else there. And what Paul understands here, what God understands, is that sex is one of the things that we are most tempted to do that about.
Oh, so good, Steve.
Think about this. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, that is how you define yourself. That is who you are. You are a follower of Christ. That is your identity. But what does the world say your identity is? Your sexuality.
That's right.
That's who you are.
Yeah.
Why? Because we've placed our sexuality on the pedestal of the world and of our lives. We've said, this is the God we worship. Yeah. And if you are not true to your sexuality, you're not really a person. And so we've made a good thing the ultimate thing. And that is why this thing is linked to, so idolatry is the most hated sin in all of the Old Testament. It's the thing that Israel can never defeat. They're fighting it all the way to the end.
And we are too.
We are just in a different way.
Yeah.
We're not worshiping Baal anymore or Molech or any of those guys. We're worshiping other things.
More self often.
I was last week. I was at UWL with some other church leaders and pastors at a question panel, and of all the questions we got, we had the most questions we got were in various forms. Questions about defining sexual morality and sexual identity. The top thing, and then on their mind is asking this question. And there's a duality to that. It's because of how that is the most aggressive opposing narrative to Christ's call in their life that they get. And then because of that, they're battling desires, saying, well, are my desires wrong? Are my desires good? What is it like? How do I know? And that's why this message is such an important message to come against. And as we were talking about this on the panel, we came back kind of what you said, Steve, and asked the question, what is the first goal end of our lives? Is it to find what we can do, or is it find who we're called to live for? And if we come back that I was created by the Creator God with a divine purpose that He has put on my life, but that purpose is for Him instead of for me. When I believe that, I accept, which is echoed throughout the Bible, right? We were chosen people, called by God, created with purpose for His pleasure to bring Him glory. This is what it means to be a Christ follower. When we start that as our foundation, the way we start asking the second questions, the next questions, they change. But when we don't believe that that's the primary, when being imitators of God, because we're now His loved children, His family, which Paul spent 3 chapters trying to help us understand the significance of that, we won't understand why we're having the conversation we're having right now.
Yeah. You realize what we've done as a society and where we are now. The reason you got so many of those questions is because we've developed a litmus test, and it goes like this. I know what I think about this topic, and right now the topic is sexuality, and it has been for a long time. I know what I think, and I know what I believe to be right. Now, I want to join a church family that agrees with me. I want to cast God in the light of whatever it is my belief about sexuality is. So I'm using my own narrative to define God. And for some people, that is, I am not going to follow a Jesus unless he dresses in all white and has a hat on and, looks like a Jewish rabbi and looks down on people a little bit. I mean, loves people, but looks down and is very stern and is very strict. And other people are like, I'm not following Jesus unless he wears makeup and a feather boa. And we have made Jesus in our image. We have made our God and based on the image that we want to see, instead of, and this is the point of the message, saying, God, open-handed, what is your view on that? What do you want me to believe?
What is your definition?
Who are you? And then let me figure out how to live and navigate this world that we're in, because it's a difficult thing to do.
Wow.
So
ultimately then, when we talked about Thanksgiving being an antidote, Thanksgiving that we have a God who can answer those questions is where the ultimate Thanksgiving needs
Praise
to go.
God that he doesn't leave us guessing. He gives us the answer.
I would add to that, though, because this is so important, and this is what I run into all the time. We have a good God that actually, he's not right just because he's right. He's right because he's good, and being created by him, what he is saying is good for us. It is not just a God that will tell us what to do. It's a good God that created us with a divine purpose, that when he's telling us what to do, it's because that will satisfy us.
Yes.
That will meet joy. Will fulfill those desires if we would only be willing to submit ourselves to him in that process.
Right. Wow. Well, this is good, guys. I think we've gone over. So next week you are bringing us the message, right, David?
Yeah.
And you will be in, wrote it down.
Ephesians 6, 5 through 9.
Okay,
little section, a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. There you go. So read ahead, study that. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.